I am recording.
And we are live.
From the industrial wastelands of Michigan to the fruited plains of Iowa, this is the
Why
American
relate
Dream.
to sheer perversity?
You are the dead. Remain exactly where you are. Make no move until you are ordered.
We burn them to ashes and then burn the ashes. That's our official motto.
Now we can see you. Clasp your hands behind your heads. Stand out in the middle of the room. Stand back to back.
Who can explain the fascination of fire? What draws us to it, whether we're young or old?
Here comes a candle to light you to bed. Here comes a chopper to chop off your head.
And welcome to the American Greed Factory podcast. This is Nathan.
This is Colin.
We have a great show for you tonight. It's going to be a lot of fun. Lots of stuff to talk about in this big, awful world. Let's see. Ukraine update. Just go watch the news. You don't need me to talk about it. I don't even know what to say anymore.
Still so completely baffled by the Russians' tactics of running a line column down a main road in a flat area. It's easily ambushable.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, but
must work for them. That's crazy, but whatever. Or it worked for them in the past, and now it isn't.
Well, it's a little different when you live in a country where if you acknowledge there's a war going on, you can go to prison for 15 years now. You can kind of lie to people and just do whatever you want, even though what you're doing is wasteful and ridiculous. But yeah, I guess, I don't know.
Something I saw that I don't know if it's true, but because that footage was weird, but they made it, or at least somebody made it look like they're taking the drones out and they're putting RPG-7 warheads on them and just dropping them from the drones on top of tanks.
Okay. I mean, it might work. I don't know. A tank is an outdated piece of equipment, so yeah, you might be able to do modern stuff and do that.
Well, I mean, even the RPG-7 is just old, but yeah, I don't know, you'd have to take the pin out of it before you do it, because there was even discussion, because even it's I don't know if that'd work or not, because people are discussing well, you'd have to undo the arming thing, and then once you did that, you basically have to assure you'd have to drop it off somewhere. You couldn't land it.
Yeah, it's going off no matter what. We're not bringing that back in for a landing and putting the safety pin back in it. Yeah, just press the home button on the drone. No, Dimitri, no. Oh.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff I saw when people are talking about OPSEC and stuff like that, where it's you got people sending pictures from their phone and all the kind of metadata that people can just get from that and get your location and all that.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, that's what happens when you're engaging a loose affiliation of. There is a Ukrainian army, but it's also just a lot of volunteers and civilians. And it's they're going to use the tools and tactics that they're going to take pictures, send phone images, and it's you're going to get a lot of data from the background. And I don't know what advice they're getting from NATO, but I'm sure they're getting a lot of do this, do that, I like the weird plane swap technique they were going to try, where it's because the Polish have a bunch of MiGs and Ukrainian pilots can fly MiGs, but they can't fly F-16s and stuff like that. And so the Polish are we'll give the Ukrainians MiGs if you give us F-22s to replace them. And the U.S. government was no. So you're going to give them 50 MiGs and we're going to give you one F-22? That's about the ratio. But then they said they couldn't do it anyway because, I mean, it's did you hear Biden on TV the other day talking to the reporters at the one thing?
Maybe once. I'm not sure if I saw.
It was about the no-fly zone. It's why aren't you doing this, Mr. President? And he's what do you think that means in your mind? what do you think a NATO enforced no-fly zone means is going to happen? Because if you don't understand, I'm going to explain it to you. It means our pilots are going to go shoot down Russian aircraft to enforce the no-fly zone. That is starting World War III. If you don't, if you're not under, if you think I'm not doing something or we're not willing to do something, it's like starting World War III is something we're not willing to do at this point. He did say at this point or something like that, but he's like, yeah, you don't, a no-fly zone isn't like you just put up like a speed trap sign and say, oh, you can't fly here. It's like, no, you have to enforce that with violence. It's not a
it does solve a lot of immediate problems, but it creates a lot more problems later on.
Well, I was listening to this like in-depth guys that like do this stuff, and it's a lot of it's like military fiction writers and stuff. It's like a thing, and they were saying like, you know, what would it mean if NATO just went in there and backed the Ukrainians? Like, what would the Russians do? And it's this one guy was saying, well, the Russians are not going to assume then at that point we're going to stop at the Ukrainian border and say, oh, no cry, no foul. You know, they would assume we're invading Russia, or at least they're going to react that way. And once we push those forces back, which we quickly would overwhelm and destroy the Russian forces, they're going to start using like theater tactical nuclear weapons to destroy the NATO forces that they will see as advancing straight to Moscow. You can drive there, you know, relatively, there's no mountain around Moscow. And so they're going to start doing that, which of course is then we're going to up our ante because now 500,000 troops have been killed. And this guy said, we don't even have theater nuclear weapons anymore. We gave those up because we decided, well, that's useless. You can do the same thing with artillery and missiles without all the side effects. However, the Russians did not give those weapons up because for what they're defending and what their tactical situation is, which is this giant flat plain that you can roll in and basically conquer European Russia, they're going to use low-yield nuclear weapons. And it's like that's because these people were asking, like, well, can we not defeat their army? And these guys are like, oh, no, we can defeat that army very quickly. But the problem is the Russians know that too. And the use of nuclear and chemical weapons is a stated part of their doctrine. It's not special exemption, like we will do this in case that. No, they'll just use them. It's another tool in the toolbox they have. They said, and also the insane amount of artillery they can field. They could just flatten every square inch of Ukraine because they have massive, massive amounts of artillery. And he goes, that would be equally as devastating and lead to the death of millions of people.
Which, I mean, that's what they're attempting to do, but like they just don't have complete air control at the moment, so they can't just immediately do that. So, but
if they, you know, if they were fighting with NATO, they would bring up all their forces, all their artillery and rocket forces, and just start at one end and just start a rolling blast wave, even if they didn't use nuclear.
They are doing that, but maybe it's more in the south. But like that's what they're at least attempting to do. But like as we can see, like all this stuff going out there doesn't seem to be. A complete lack of information. There doesn't seem all the promised military equipment seems a lot of it has just been vaporized to some oligarch's bank account so he can pay for a boat.
I don't know what's going on with that stuff, but these guys are essentially saying if you put the Russians against the wall and they feel like, well, this is it, they're going to start acting that way, and nobody wants that. That's why.
Well, and theoretically too. Also, like, you know, if they you know if they go to attempt to use a nuclear weapon, we also have no idea if the chain of command of that is actually going to follow through with it.
We hope not.
Yeah, we hope not. Yeah, but I don't know what's more likely, of them actually using a nuke or them just killing Putin.
Oh, well, this comes with the fear factor of the Russian. Nuclear weapons don't come into play unless NATO just annihilates their army in Ukraine, and the Russian paranoia is like, they're coming for us now, why would they stop? Then once you get like to the border,
then it'd flip it.
Then they start using the field level nuclear weapons. And the other danger here, the reason like this is this is the most dangerous time we've ever lived in, is both sides, but especially the Russians, are trying to blow the dust and pull the tarps off that creaky old Cold War infrastructure around nuclear weapons and massively destructive weapons. We haven't even done a good job maintaining that stuff, let alone the Russians. God knows what they could turn on and accidentally like let's reactivate perimeter, and all of a sudden all their missiles launch at once. Like, oops, that's not what we wanted. That's another thing that makes like there seems to be a chorus of people out there that want to talk escalation. It's like, oh yeah, guys, you don't want to escalate with these people. You really don't. The world does not need two dying empires swinging nuclear swords at each other. This is how you write the tale of the last days of Rome before the new Dark Ages. Is like, oh, there were once two great powers that were in decline, and they just decided to mutually commit suicide. It's like, yeah, you don't want to be the guy who's like pushing for that.
They chose honor.
Yeah, they chose honor. Yeah, so that's but then again, there's all kinds of where I like the bizarre. Have you seen well, so much of this stuff have been banned, or not banned, but like we can't get access to the bizarre Russian propaganda that's going on in Russia right now. So we don't know what the people are being told there, but I've heard some of it's like pretty. It's been described to me as like, oh, this was on TikTok last night before they pulled it down, and it's like the equivalent of Russian influencers. And there's someone just standing off camera pointing an AK-47.
Oh, is that where like all the influencers had the exact same script and they read off?
Yeah. And they're saying stuff and like about how glorious it is and how it's like, well, Russia's going to be safe now because we can protect ourselves from the Ukrainians. And I was like, what? Let's liberate the Ukrainians from their corrupt leadership. It's like, oh, wow. That's like the pot calling the kettle black, but okay. But yeah, I guess you can't see that stuff anymore. But I've heard a lot of it was like stilted and bad because you could tell like these people were under pressure. Which nothing surprises me with Russia. I've always been fascinated with Russia, and none of this stuff. When I hear some of this stuff, people are like, "Oh, I can't believe it." It's like, yeah, you just haven't been paying attention.
Is there any foreground stuff or weird background stuff with China in this whole thing? Are they just like putting their hands up and churning around?
Yeah, I don't know. I know they said they wouldn't loan Russia money. So it's like I don't know how much that affects them. Because you hear different things. I mean, because it depends on who you listen to. Like either Putin and the Russian government are these political masterminds that like this is all part of a plan. Even if this seems like it's going wrong, it's not. It's going right because this is the kind of games that they want to play. Or it's like, oh, this is a complete clusterfuck, and it's they're going to fail badly, and like the Ukraine this spring, the Ukraine's going to be invading and retaking Russia. So it depends on who you believe and what's going on, because one guy said like, well, ever since they invaded Crimea and the Donbass regions, which is really all they wanted to control, was all the natural gas pockets in the lake there, or the sea there or whatever. They saw kind of this is what sanctions are going to be like. So we've got to prepare for a worse version of this by hardening our economy against global sanctions. And so some people are like, well, they were already ready for this. They expected all this. And then other people are like, no, they're in complete chaos. And so you don't know what to believe.
I don't know. Is the sanction reaction, is that completely unprecedented?
I don't know.
Because I know, like, basically it seemed like, in the Cold War era, like the Russians were just on their own. Like they weren't a part of the economy, even though like we were literally buying titanium from the Russians through weird back channel means so we can make our own submarines.
That was the SR-71s. But I mean, yeah, when the Soviet Union was a thing, like America and Britain especially, but a lot of other countries kept the Soviets from the global economy, except when it came to resource extraction, like oil, natural gas, metals. Like the Russians, the Soviets had a backbone because you've heard about this thing in Russia where it's like we wanted hard currency during the Soviet times because the ruble just vacillated wildly. They tried to pin it to the dollar and say, it has the same value as the dollar, but everyone was from the outside was like, no, it doesn't. So they couldn't. The backbone of the Soviet economy was dependent on two things: selling oil and natural gas to the rest of the world, and grain, basically grain subsidies from America, which a lot of people don't realize. From the 50s through the 90s, like they were just buying grain from us because they couldn't efficiently farm enough to feed their own people. And these were our declared enemies. But yeah, we would always give them food and things like that. And So I don't know now, like, because I know like all.
Well, I remember people making a lot of stuff about like the Swift bank transfer stuff being taken away, but like I don't even know, was that even like in place during the Cold War?
I don't know I don't know how banking. I think a lot of that, the Swift stuff was had to do with like getting money and credits for the oil they were selling and not having to go through intermediaries. Because a lot of that international banking means it's just you cut out the middle guy. It's like, oh, you're paying him 10% to move your money through. Now you don't have to pay 10%. We just have this unified banking system only for like oil, natural resources, whatever's critical to their economy. So I know that removing that just means, well, they have to put their money through cutouts, and it's going to cost more money along the way, but they can still do it, but it still hurts their economy.
Yeah.
So, but I don't think the Russians, I don't believe they didn't know this was going to happen. Like I don't think that these sanctions are like a surprise.
Well, the leadership knew the
well,
people obviously didn't know.
When I say Russia, I'm not talking about the Russian people who are just as fucked as anyone in this. I'm talking about Putin and the guys around him. Yeah, they're not stupid. They knew what they were doing. I don't know. Again, Russia's used to being isolated from the world's economy. Now, if you cut off all their oil and natural gas sales, that's really good. That's all they have. But that's a question to see. Like, if you think gas is high here, there's people in Europe now that are looking at spending half their income to heat their home. Now we're going into the spring now, so in the Western Hemisphere, it's things we're getting into spring, summer. That might not be such an issue now. Where are we going to be at next September? I don't know. Because are we going to build a pipeline from Canada to Europe underwater to supply their heating needs and their oil needs? I don't know. It's just a race to see whose economy collapses first, us or theirs. That's what I see this shaping up to be.
Yeah.
Now the OPEC
and it's theirs, but it doesn't seem like they care if it collapses.
Well, see, that's a difference. See, if our economy collapses and everyone becomes poor here, we have things like called the vote, and we also will have protests and stuff where police will not fire into crowds. Unlike Russia, where they don't, like they'll just kill you there. They don't, especially when things get grim. Because they've, like I said, that law about if you acknowledge there's a war, you could go to prison for 15 years. Okay, that just got passed like a week ago. So they're going to change their laws very rapidly. They've had rebellions there before, but
yeah, that's how Russia changes over their government.
Yeah,
through violent power changes.
Yeah.
So,
and I don't know anything about the status of the army and who they're loyal to and how that's going to work.
I did see an interesting thing. I'm not sure if there's that video that you linked to, but I saw a video about like kind of like Putin's right-hand guy. He's like more like Eastern Russia. So he's like more kind of like Asian. And so like apparently like on like the top military guys, they're kind of like from that area because they trust the white guys less apparently.
Okay, well that probably makes sense. I mean, the history of Russia is like, right out there in the open. So,
because like I forget who this guy was, but he's like basically like been like a top military guy like through multiple, like even back when.
No, is it Chernomyrdin or is it Volkov or?
Yeah, it might be the first guy he said. I can't remember, but he's basically been there for like 30 years.
He's like 80 years old now, I'm sure.
They also showed like a picture of his house, and it kind of was like very Asian styling to it, and it's like. That thing is huge. Okay, yeah. So yeah,
the old dacha. A good place to vacation, and sometimes a place you die when the rebellion comes. They pulled what's his name, Gorbachev and Race out of his dacha when the communists or when the coup happened, and they're like, oh. Gorbachev was like, well, I guess we're dead now, honey. They're just going to take us and shoot us at the Kremlin. That's how this always goes. They ended up doing it, but it's like, yeah, it's they
and apparently the Italians like reprimanded another oligarch boat that they said is Putin's, and it's worth like $700 million.
God, it's so stupid. They need to pass international laws about how your boat can only be so big. What a waste of like resources. It's like I can land 3 helicopters on my boat. It's like, why?
I'd be impressed if that boat could be controlled by just like one person, but like you need a crew of people to run that crap.
I'd be impressed if it was like a James Bond villain, like it rose out of the water like a hydrofoil and just started firing missiles, but it was as big as a cruise ship. It's like that would be. It's going like 100 miles an hour on the surface of the water. It's like, okay, that's money well spent. If it like took flight, like it just flew away like a giant plane. It's like, oh wow, okay, that was worth $700 million. But yeah, now it's always like there's marble floors on a ship. It's like, what? So dumb. It's all like gold and tacky inside. It's like the worst style you could imagine.
Well, speaking of kicking the Russians out, Mazepin is out of F1.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's talk about this.
Yeah, so Nikita Mazepin, whose dad, I can't remember his name, basically paid for his seat in F1. Nikita Mazepin was an F2 and he did win several races, but he also is seen as not a very good racer.
Yeah,
well, at least compared to the F1 racers.
Wasn't he like doing weird sex stuff too? And he got
he was groping a lady basically like the day after he got signed, and like that got up on YouTube, which you can almost seem like the like propaganda that like somebody was obviously putting out on his behalf, because there's like a post that went up that said it was like the lady in the video, and it's like, he never meant to harm me, and then like later on it was like, I didn't write that. Like, don't talk to me ever again. It's like, okay, that's the one I believe.
Yeah. That sounds like anger. Yeah.
And then you just find posts later on where it'd be like someone was like talking about meeting the F1 drivers in America, and they're like, oh no, actually Nikita Mazepin was the cool one. It's like, and like I was like falling for it for a moment, and I was like, oh wait, no, this is just propaganda, like written on his behalf. Yeah,
this is like a Moscow Twitter account by a New York.
Well, I saw the recent Drive to Survive. There's actually kind of there's an episode that focuses on Haas and mostly Nikita Mazepin. There was like almost a heartfelt moment because he's talking about him and his dad, and he says like, throughout my entire career, like that's in karting and all that stuff, I've done 400 races. My dad's only missed 13 races, so it's like, okay, well they seem close, but also his dad's a Russian oligarch, so
yeah, it's a bad time to be a Russian oligarch. You never hear about what about the decent Russian oligarchs? I never hear that phrase. So
they're dead.
It's like, yeah, they're all in prison or dead or something. Yeah, it's.
Haas dropped the sponsor, which I don't. There's a lot of weird stuff around Haas where it always seems like that team's just falling apart at the seams and it can never hold itself together. But then like, I read this thing that Andretti put out the other day, because Andretti is trying to get an F1. Yeah, and he said he's offered to buy the Haas team like 6 times, and he won't sell it because apparently just having a car in F1 is like the greatest advertisement you can have. Like, it doesn't matter if there's a shit team on there. It says Haas in the car. It's like just pure advertising.
Yeah. Like there's some kind of weird calculation there about, well,
there's car manufacturers are very skittish about getting an F1, because if they field a new car, a new team, and it sucks, it makes their whole brand look bad because they make cars.
Yeah.
So like Haas, which is not necessarily, it's not a car brand, but it is a manufacturing brand, which is also bad looking in some other ways.
Yeah.
Like you should be able to build the best car possible. You have the machines that literally make the fucking cars.
Yeah, we've had people at work that because I remember talking about F1. These guys were walking through. There were contractors putting in this pump, and it was like, Haas Industries or what. It's like, oh, I recognize that name. It's like, yeah, they're major equipment manufacturers.
Yeah, they make C machines. That's the only CNC machines I've used are Haas.
Yeah,
I think their only competitors like I think there's a German company and there's some Chinese companies and there's like a smaller Japanese company, but like Haas, I believe, is like the biggest one, or maybe just in America. You never know. Like it's like sometimes like Mercedes, like even though it's like a high end brand, but like globally, it's a huge car manufacturer.
Yeah, they make a lot of half the Amazon trucks around here just have big Mercedes, vans. It's like, oh, okay, that's different. It's like, do those cost more? And then you look it up, and it's like, no, they're made in Turkey, and they just slap the name on them. The engine's from Japan, and it's like, oh, okay. Because you see that Mercedes emblem, you're like, oh, they're making like these real precision delivery vans for Amazon in Germany. It's like, nope, not at all. It's just an Econoline with a Mercedes emblem on the front. Like, oh, okay, that actually makes more business sense, even though the imagination of it is like, oh, it's the ultimate like delivery machine or something. It's like, nah, it's just a box.
Or is that weird thing where like Volvo makes semi trucks and it's like, is that the same company? It's like, yeah, but not really.
No. Yeah. The Volvo truck division, I think, is owned by an American company now, and most of them are made here. And the ones that are used in Europe are made there. But yeah, it's like separate because that was the only thing that made money. Like their car division didn't make money for 20 years. I still don't, as far as I know. They just keep changing owners.
But they also make like that huge construction. Like they compete with Caterpillar too. Like, it's like,
Yeah.
Is that the same Volvo? And it's
Nope.
like, no.
That's Volvo. What's that called? Volvo Heavy Industries, or
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, they're like
that seemed
headquartered in New York now, or something.
But yeah, so that's always a weird thing with the Haas F1 team, where it seems like they're always on the brink, but it's just like Gene Haas is like, nah, it just he can spend the money if he wants, I guess.
My name, my money. Yep.
It wasn't his money last year, but anyways, yeah. So they kicked out Nikita Mazepin and Uralkali, which that was the name of the company.
Yeah.
Which was a chemical company, but they said it was a fertilizer company. So, so now I'm thinking, like, is this bomb making company?
Yeah, they make nerve gas. They're nerve. They make Novichok.
Yeah. So they got a new car design or livery to kick that off, and they had to fill the spot. And they brought back Kevin Magnussen.
Yeah, so I heard that.
Which I always thought it was crazy that he wasn't in F1. Because, like, I mean, I don't think you'd watch the season where he was doing a really good job with the shit box that Haas was. I mean, it's kind of always been a shit box, but I mean, it's an off-the-shelf Ferrari, so it's a very small team compared to, I mean, like, I think they have 70 people working on that team, and like Mercedes has 500. Like,
yeah,
that's the difference between Haas and Mercedes. Yeah, so yeah, Kevin Magnussen is back, and which that deal went together like really quickly because he had to get out of like 2 other contracts that he was driving for.
Yeah, wasn't he like in kart or something?
Well, he did some reserve stuff in IndyCar. He was testing with IndyCar this year.
Okay.
But he was in World Endurance Championship he was racing for the Cadillac team, I think, for World Endurance Championship, but then there was another one he was racing for, which it was Peugeot was putting together a team. But I can't remember.
He wasn't in kart. Okay, I thought he was in kart.
No, I mean that's just IndyCar now.
Yeah, I just called
been combined. But yeah, he did do a race last year in IndyCar because he filled in for a guy who's when his car.
So
randomly accelerated into a wall.
Okay.
Yeah, he just filled in once.
I thought he was doing it full time. Okay.
And then so they're doing testing in Bahrain right now, and then like Haas with more bad luck, their cargo got held over in Turkey because the plane needed to be repaired.
Oh God.
So their stuff didn't get there until later. And then finally, I think they got stuff together. They gave them some extra time that they could work. They could work on the car, so it was just them on the track for a couple hours. So like, they got like 2 hours at the night on Friday, and Kevin Magnussen went out there in really ideal conditions. And it's what they call glory runs.
Okay.
Because a lot of people like keep their, what do you call that? Like hiding their hand or what do you call that?
Keeping your cards close.
Yeah, because they're not really, no one's showing off like what these cars can do. So sometimes the old guys talk about stories of in the old days, they'd send a car out there with the engine completely tuned up, basically no fuel, so it'd be as light as possible, and they go do like this impressive lap, and then like the only reason they do that is to impress potential advertisers or sponsors to get on the car. It's like, hey, this car is going to like obliterate the field, and then when you get to the actual like race time, it's like their car's in last place all the time. So but yeah, Kevin Magnussen went out there and he got the fastest lap for that day of testing, which is like a good like morale boost for Haas. It doesn't necessarily mean anything for testing because we don't know really what's going on, so those times are deceiving. But
right.
But also somebody pointed out like Haas is and all of testing that they've been participated in, they've never been at the top of the sheet. So that was a first for them.
Oh, okay. So even if it is like kind of like pseudo reality, it's like that's never happened for him before, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah. It seems like Haas is seems to be in a lot better spirits now. So, yeah, it's just crazy.
Not in bed with Russian oligarchs.
Yeah. So yeah, it's good to see him back and in probably a way better car the last time he was in it. So.
Yeah.
And yeah, if they get a point this year, like that'll be a success for Haas.
Oh yeah, they'll be breaking out the $500 a bottle champagne. If that happens.
And if they can sneak a podium, like that'll be like that's the year done. Like we can just pack it up. We don't need to do anything else. But yeah, I've testing so far. Like it's almost every team. There's something to be optimistic about. So. And all the cars are so different. It's
yeah, they are different. They definitely look distinct this year from one another.
Which yeah, it's probably gonna suck more next year because like whoever comes out this year, whoever dominates this year, like everybody's probably gonna switch all their philosophy to whoever dominates this year.
Yeah.
So like all the cars are gonna homogenize, but at the moment, nobody knows what anything is gonna do better. So it's just great right now because everything looks so different. Yeah, like the big talk was like Mercedes showed up with their new car, which basically has incredibly sleek side pods that don't stick out at all from the car.
Okay.
They're just this like little vertical slits in the side of the car, and it just completely hugs to the bodywork. It almost looks like an iron. It actually looks incredibly ugly, and none of the times they put out there necessarily look impressive, but obviously like you just never count out Mercedes because everybody does and they just always win. So
Lewis Hamilton's terrible, you know. They're over. The legacy is dead. It's like, yeah, you have like 2 bad qualifying and it's like, yeah, just throw in the towel, Mercedes. Just
I remember like this is the same team the last 2 times they've had big changes. They won the championship. Like when they were Braun GP, that was a big change. They won the championship. They became Mercedes, and then Red Bull won it for 4 years. But then the next big change came, and they just won the entire thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, wouldn't count out Mercedes. But yeah, theirs looks the most different out of everyone. So, and they have a weird like where the wing, where the mirror is, they put like this little wing on it.
Yeah.
So, because now there's no side pod sticking out, they just have this wing on it, which that's actually where people are saying like that's where the legality comes into concern because of that little wing there. And then I saw like some deep this aerodynamicist was dissecting things, and he had a lot of like interesting things to point out where it's like where these engineers get clever in the interpretation of the rules, and he's like talking about like when you dissect something in like the Y sector or in the X or in the Z, it's like because it says like in the rules like these have to be 2 separate parts, and it's like, well, if you dissect it in the Y, they are 2 distinct separate parts.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, that's nuts.
Yeah, those are the guys that like that went to MIT and then went over to Harvard to get their law degree, and it's like combine this knowledge. Yeah.
But yeah, so like yeah, Mercedes times didn't necessarily like look like that great, but it doesn't mean anything. But like they are obviously have some shit up their sleeve that nobody else does, so that's interesting. Red Bull, like today, like he did Max Verstappen did the fastest lap out of all of testing, which like these cars are like way heavier, like they are about 100 pounds heavier than last year.
Wow, that's a lot for an F1 car.
Yeah. So I think it's 50 kilos, so it's actually more like 125 pounds or something like that.
Okay.
And yeah, so like, and the new ground effect stuff, like they say the cars like in the fast corners, like they're just as fast as last year's cars, but it's like because they're heavier, when they had to get into slow corners, that's when everything goes to shit. That's when these cars look very unwieldy and clunky.
Oh, it gets pear-shaped then, huh?
Because they were saying like these cars were going to be about 4 seconds slower than last year's car, and now it seems like the engineers have clawed back all that time, so now it seems like they're going to be about maybe a second slower, but we'll tell by the first race if that's actually true. Like,
oh yeah, Verstappen says he was only like 80%, you know.
Yeah.
At Bahrain, he says I wasn't going as fast as that car could go, but you never know. Like, yeah, people say stuff, and then it's like, that's, you know, locker room talk.
But also there's like a weight minimum, and like, and this is where Alfa Romeo has like that. There's a bright hope because they're the only team that have met the minimum weight.
Oh, so they got room to grow, huh?
Yeah, or no, maximum. No, they met the maximum weight. Everybody else is over the maximum weight.
Oh, okay.
So they're the only team that's under it. So yeah, but they're gonna raise the weight by like 5 kilograms, and then everybody will pretty much be in then. Because also like they're like the teams are just kind of like putting a bunch of weird support things on the that attach to the skirt and the body of the car to kind of keep the sort of, what do you call it, the Venturi tunnels a bit stiffer, because that's what the porpoising is coming from, is like kind of the Venturi tunnels like a bit flexing a bit too much and bottoming out, and because that's still a problem for a lot of the teams.
Yeah.
Except it seems like McLaren doesn't really have that problem, but they have a whole different problem. Actually, a lot of teams have this problem. Is that they did the test in Barcelona. It was cool and not windy, and now they're in Bahrain where it's hot and windy and lots of sand, and all their brakes are catching on fire.
Yep.
In fact, the brake drums for the Williams caught on fire, and when a guy took a fire extinguisher to it, the brakes blew up.
Damn. It's been really hot.
Oh yeah, they were on fire. They're about to melt the car. The fire melted the back axle, or the rear axle. No, not the axle. Not the axle, the suspension rods. It melted through the suspension.
Well, that's okay.
But they said that was something they misaligned the brake pad, so it was basically like they were driving the car and the brakes were just
time.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, that'll get you up to failure pretty quick.
Yeah. And apparently the sensor wasn't giving the information that was happening at all, so they had no idea.
Yeah, brakes in your regular car will do that if you drive around with your foot on them all the time.
Yeah. But it's also funny because I've gone one step further, and I bothered to watch testing this year, which I just kind of had on the background, wasn't focusing on it. But I was playing a game because of the time difference. I was like, the testing started at 1 a.m. in the morning, so it's like getting into testing. And so when William was out there when that happened, they had Alex Albon in the booth like trying to talk about things, and he's on the Williams team, so he's gonna be like, should I go, guys? And he made a joke real quickly. He's like, yeah, we're trying to do something new with heating up the rear tires. We thought fire would do it.
Oh, okay.
And then the car exploded.
That to happen. Yeah. That's part of our plan, see? If you throw fiery chunks of metal on the track, the other cars can't pass you. Tires will explode.
And then the Williams, I think on day one looked really good. And they also have their philosophy is a bit closer to Mercedes, where it has the bodywork is very shrunk in and very small side pods. And then they also have some centerline cooling thing that they're doing, where they're trying to draw all the air in like through the nose of the car to cool the rest of the car.
Oh, okay.
So that gives them more room to keep the bodywork as snug as possible, and so that apparently that lets them go really fast. So they look competitive in what they're doing. McLaren, like, they look fast and their car doesn't porpoise, so that looks good for them. Although Daniel Ricciardo has COVID, so
What? That's still a thing?
But yeah, so he hasn't done any testing in Bahrain. He did some in Barcelona, but none here. And presumably he'll be, so he has to do a 7-day quarantine. So he tested positive on Friday. So basically he can race as long as next Friday he pops a clean test.
Well, they're making him do 17 days?
7.
Oh, I was going to say, okay, yeah. I was going to 7. Okay, that sounds reasonable.
So just a week.
Yeah.
But then I looked it up and it's like, does the McLaren have a reserve driver? And no, they don't.
These guys got to stop hanging out in bars in Europe.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, Daniel was getting a bit too excited, so he was commiserating with a bunch of people. Because he literally hadn't been home because he's Australian. And he hadn't been home for like 2 years because of their restrictions. And so
right. Yeah, they went back to a prison colony.
So he finally got to go back to Australia this year. So maybe he's just got a bit too lax with things. Well, I also I believe F1 has basically got rid of all their protocols, so that they aren't necessary anymore. But yeah, so now it's on you.
Yeah.
And whatever country they're in, that those still apply. But yeah, some people are saying that or Alpine is lending out their driver if they need one, which is Oscar Piastri, who is also Australian, and he was the F2 champion, and he does not have a F1 drive this year.
Huh.
And there is a weird rule with F2 is like if you win F2, you are out of the championship.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And the weird thing with F1, where like they have a very limited amount of teams, there's really nowhere for them to go except for like, hey, you want to go to Formula E? It's like, has anybody ever come out of Formula E to F1? It's like, no. So then no.
Yeah. No one wants to make the out to pasture movement.
Yeah. So there's like Charles Leclerc was like, I think he won F2 and he became like a reserve driver for Haas, and then he eventually went to Alfa Romeo for a bit, and then Ferrari picked him up. So like, that can work out for some people, but yeah, the seats in F1 are so hard to get.
Oh, okay.
That's like, I mean, it's like the most exclusive sport in the world. I mean, you think of like basketball, like there's like 30 guys on a basketball team. There's 30 teams. That's 900 positions. Like it's F1. There's 20 people that can drive these fucking cars in the world.
Yeah, and that can compete. Yeah,
yeah. And so so there's pretty much there's like the only way to F1 is through F2. Like there's nobody's coming out of IndyCar, although they're trying to get them. And they pretty much can't because of the super license requirements.
Oh, okay.
And like there is some crossover. Like if you win races in IndyCar, it does count towards a super license, but it's like a third or half or something like that. Because in F2, if you win a race in F2, you basically almost automatically qualify for a super license.
Oh, okay.
But in other races, it's like, because they had Pietro Fittipaldi out there for the first session for Haas. He's their reserve driver, and he does have a super license, but like his is incredibly weird because like I don't think he's ever won an F2 race, but he's like just gone to all these different racing fields and like picked up wins, so he just like eventually kind of has a super license, but it's like very tenuous. I read an article about it where it's like basically how like, you know, he's an okay driver, but he's not really an F1 worthy driver. So he just goes to lesser championships and kind of wins them there, and he's just racked up a bunch of points. Yeah, like Austin Martin. I don't know that the car seems cool. It seems like it didn't seem like anybody was too that impressed with it, but they didn't seem like. It doesn't seem like the end of the world for Aston Martin, although it is weird that their team principal left, Otmar Safnauer, or how do you say his name? It's Otmar.
Oh yeah,
Safnauer. That's it. Yeah, I think he's Romanian or something. He's actually from Detroit, but like he's like born in Romania.
Oh okay.
Yeah, he went over to Alpine. So that's kind of weird because like that guy's known for putting together a team that can like punch way above its weight. So it's weird to see him gone. But also it seems like Lawrence Stroll is like a Bond villain. So I doubt it's really good. And last year, you know, they had a lot of high hopes for that car, and it just wasn't as good as they wanted it to be. So I imagine that was a lot of pressure.
Yeah. Was there any talk about the Mercedes team sponsorship debacles that might be coming up?
No, what do they got going?
Well, you know, Petronas, which is the national oil company of Malaysia.
Yeah.
Like they will not stop doing business with Russia. They're not like, they're like, well, but you got to remember that's like, what is Petronas? Like 20% of the Malaysian economy. Cause it's like owned by the government of Malaysia.
Yeah.
Not like a public, like own, like a, you know, like a regular corporation. But I know that like, cause they won't do the Russian Grand Prix and stuff, like F1's really going hard against, and, you know, getting rid of Mazepin and all that. And it's like, yeah, Petronas is like really involved with Russian refining, and they have all kinds of business to dealings with Gazprom. And
we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I don't know. I just remember I was casually reading like, yeah, that's so they like provide a lot of funding to the Mercedes team. I mean, it's right on their car.
Yeah, that's what they call a title sponsor. So it's like Mercedes, AMG, Petronas team.
Yeah.
Like it's in the title of the team. Although nobody says that. It's just the Mercedes team.
Yeah, I know. It's just I remember hearing it's like, oh yeah, because they built those towers. That's probably what they're most known for here. Remember the Petronas towers that were in James Bond movie in the 90s? Yeah. They were the tallest buildings in the world briefly. Yeah, that's them.
I don't know, but also it's just a weird thing with like oil in general with F1 because it's like because basically like with the existence of Formula E, it basically almost is like means that F1 will never be a fully electric car.
No, it's not possible with the technology we have. And it also would, like, Formula E is like, that is electric car racing at its apex. There is nothing better than that. There's nothing more well formulated than that for that kind of technology. Yeah. But that is simply the end of that technology. Like like if they just ban internal combustion engines, Formula E will be F1 because that's all that will be left.
Yeah.
That'll be that kind of racing. So but there's no like it's just like that's never going to replace the Formula One, or at least not for 20 years or more.
So so they're talking about like the next engine could be hydrogen power cars, which that'd be interesting. Or just really renewable fuel that's just made, you know, purely out of like switchgrass or whatever. Because that's one big change this year is their E10 fuel, so it's 10% ethanol.
Yeah,
which is said it's
gonna be murder on those engines.
well, no, they're saying that it's not good for power, but it actually like less knock rate. So so overall it's gentler on the engines, but it's not as much power. But
I guess because those engines are probably replaced and rebuilt a lot, so it's probably not a problem for them. It's a big problem with the ethanol fuel is it's like the deposits it leaves in your engines.
Yeah,
because it basically breaks down into like simple sugar after it's heated enough, and it's like that's not good for your engine. It's not the same kind of sugar.
But
you're
also,
thinking.
it also depends like the kind of material the engine's made out
Yeah,
of.
because
So.
that could and that could be making because a lot of things that are ethanol are natural gas derivatives also, so it's a different kind of thing. Yeah, hydrogen would be interesting unless like it explodes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they have hydrogen powered buses, and they seem to work fine.
Yeah.
You ever seen those?
Oh yeah, they used to
where
have them around here.
They'd have like they'd have like a guy like hold like a glass up to the tailpipe and drink the water that comes out of the hydrogen plant, because just water. It's combining hydrogen and oxygen, and it literally produces water.
Yeah, they had two of them in Ann Arbor for their public buses, and the regalia on the side was just like three circles interposed, and it was like powered by hydrogen. But they don't have them anymore because they just, I mean, it was kind of just a proof of concept. It wasn't a mass produced thing. It was something General Motors made, and it's like, yeah, we'll run those for a while, and then they had it was like 5 years, and it's like they have a life expectancy, and that's it.
But I forget, there's two ways you can do the hydrogen powered engine. Where it's basically you're combining hydrogen and oxygen, and it's essentially an electric engine with a hydrogen powered plant.
Yeah.
Or you can make a combustible hydrogen engine, which it'll actually like put out way more what do you call it? like air waste, toxins,
Carbon emissions.
Yeah, it'll actually do more of that if you do it that way, so it's less, or it's more harmful to the environment.
No, this was the one where it had the big hump in the back, and it was just charging two batteries. That's what the ones down here were. Because the thing was, the big critique of them was you had to seat 12 less people.
Yeah.
Because you had this big giant engine charging two batteries in the back, but again, it's all proof of concept. Like that stuff's not ready for prime time. Not yet. It will be.
But new engines aren't coming till 2025, I think. So.
Or it'll just be like Mr. Fusion in
Back
to the Future. They just throw garbage in the engine before it goes out on the tracks, and it just breaks it down.
Just cut up people, throw it in there.
Yeah, whatever waste products you have. But
and what else happened at that? Yeah, so brakes. There's probably going to be a lot of brake issues because it's hard for them to change. I think because I think they only have one manufacturer for brakes. I don't think every team has to use the same manufacturer for brakes.
Oh, okay.
I think that's how it is. I think they all use Brembo brakes.
Yep. We use those on the high performance cars here.
But it also might not be the brakes themselves. It could be what is it, like the cowlings on the well, also those are standard too. I don't know what it is, but the teams, it was a problem for a lot of teams. We'll see if it's a problem next
They got
week.
smart guys working on it. They'll figure something out.
Well, it seemed like McLaren had a lot of problems, and they were like, okay, here's the fix. But we have to get it from England to here in less than 4 hours. And it's like, well, that's not happening. So that was their big thing. Okay, whatever teams do we have go through? Alpine was the only one I was like kind of seemed worried about because like it just seems to be kind of nothing coming out of there. Like it's like nothing good, nothing bad. It's just they're just there. So I don't know what to think about them, but we could see that that Renault engine is the most unique engine out of everyone there because they're the only ones that have it. So and they have some upgrade on it. So it could come out of nowhere, but I haven't seen it so far. But
yeah, there's always hope.
Yeah. And then AlphaTauri, they just seem fine, but they're already talking to Gasly. He's like, yeah, we're not fighting for championships, but we're definitely gonna fight.
Just interesting qualifying statement, like, yeah, okay.
He just had, sometimes you just gotta, that's the weird thing about F1, and sometimes you just gotta know. It's like who you're racing, and it's not the whole field. It's like it's these two guys. These are two teams we're racing. We're never gonna win a race unless all the guys up front wreck each other.
Yeah, it's just development. It's like, yeah, we're just developing, waiting for, someone's going to age out. There's going to be a change, and then we'll be ready.
Yeah.
We're good, but the only way we can proof this technology out is to just race, and you can't do it any other way.
But this is like AlphaTauri has always been kind of a team that's clearly a B team. Like it's purely just for young Red Bull drivers to come through on their way to the Red Bull team, and now it seems like they're a more competitive team unto themselves. So they're not just there to be a B team anymore. They're gonna fight in the midfield, but they're not just there to be on the knee for Red Bull anymore. So.
Yeah.
Also, it's just a weird situation for Gasly. It's just like, where does he go? Why does he stay?
Is he still getting paid? That's probably a good. Yeah, that's probably it.
But he's a good. If you put him in a winning car, he might win. I don't know if he's going to beat Max Verstappen in another Red Bull, but if he somehow gets in that Mercedes, he could be fighting for wins.
Oh yeah. It just depends on what institutional deals they have with their people and who they got coming.
Yeah, that's like another weird thing, like because Alex Albon had to be like released from his Red Bull contract to race for Williams, but he's still under like Red Bull Thai, like the Thailand like department of it. He's still, so it says Red Bull on his helmet, so he's still sponsored by Red Bull, but just like the country of Thai's Red Bull, because that's where it originally comes from. Like Red Bull that here is licensed from Thai Red Bull.
Okay.
Through an Austrian company that owns Red Bull.
Yeah. Yeah, I knew Red Bull was like a European, Southeast Asian conglomerate thing.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are like, that's a British company. It's like, no, it's not British.
It's Austrian. Well, it's the Red Bull team. It's F1 team is based out of Britain, but almost every team is.
Yeah, I was gonna say Mercedes-Benz team is based out of Britain. So. Yeah.
Because F1 is just a super British sport, so that's just.
Oh yeah, well, all your expertise is there for that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, remember we were talking like Ford versus Ferrari and Le Mans. It's like, well, yeah, Ford, they basically farmed all that out to England and then brought it back here to do testing on it.
Yeah. And
put our drivers in it. And also, like British driver was the one who won. But yeah, it was like, that's where all that is. You don't do NASCAR in Britain. You do that in, South Carolina. That's where that architecture is. So
built by an Italian company.
Yes.
Actually, I think got bought. I think it's based out of Italy, but I think it's like technically an American company. What's that, Dallara, that make all that stuff? So
yeah.
Dallara basically makes a lot of racing series that have what do you call what do they call it? Where all the cars are the same.
Oh, standardized racing. Yeah. There's a name for that. What's that called? Standardized racing metric something.
What is?
It's called stock car racing, but yeah, that's not the term we're thinking of.
Raisin. Let's see if I can just accidentally
find it.
Yeah. Oh,
maybe.
Too much silence. I did watch Indycar. They had their first race out of St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
Which that is an interesting track because it's done on an airfield.
Well, that's right. Yeah.
A spec series. That's what they call it.
Oh, spec series. Okay.
Yeah, because they all have the same specifications, which F1 is not.
No.
Yeah. So Dallara like builds like the cars for NASCAR. They build the Formula E's cars, Indy cars, Formula 2, Formula 3. They build a lot of stuff.
They have a giant plant in Indianapolis for.
For IndyCar.
Yeah, like they just run them down a line almost. It's not like where I work, where it's a factory dedicated, but it's damn close to.
Yeah.
Like they make a lot of cars at that place.
Yeah, and when I say that, it seems like, oh, Jesus, that must be like, the huge manufacturers. Like, no, they need to make like 40 cars. So,
Yeah.
I mean, they cost millions of dollars, but they only need to make
40 hand-built cars. And a lot of weird expertise.
And interesting, the race wasn't that great, but like the interesting thing with it is that, so last year's champion, who's a first-time champion, Alex Palou, he came in second. So he's still at the top. And then you have last year's rookie, Scott McLaughlin, who was like a 4-time champion in Australian supercars. So he came over to Indycar. So he won the first race of the season and he got pole position. So that's really interesting. So, and Grosjean ended up 6th. Colton Herta was 5th, and they're both Andretti cars. So, they finished. Although like the team stuff doesn't work the same way as it does in F1, so that's not necessarily doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah, that's kind of like team with a contracted driver,
Well, it's because like I think like the bigger teams like Chip Ganassi and Penske, like they can run 4 cars, which doesn't make sense. And there's some teams that run 1 car, so it's like, how does this work out? It's like, okay, there's a drivers championship, and then they have what's called I can't remember. It's the engine manufacturer championship. So there's 2 engines. There's a Honda engine and there's a Chevy engine.
Yeah.
And so whoever wins a race, like the points go to that. And at the end of the year, there's an engine winner.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Which it's weird because it's 2 companies build essentially the same engine. Although they have slight characteristics that are different. So this Chevy engine is slightly more powerful, and the Honda engine has slightly better fuel mileage.
Huh.
So on some tracks, whatever engine you have has either an advantage or a disadvantage. So, but
yeah. So it's like different power ranges for different tracks. Yeah.
Yeah. What else? Yeah, hopefully this year could be a complete shit show for F1. But at least all the cars will look cool and different. So.
Yeah, I remember when we used to have what was that company that Ford owned? Cosworth.
Oh yeah.
Those guys would come into this was the one Ford sold Cosworth like a long time ago. But yeah, these guys would come in because we had a machine that could make I forget, it was doing measurements, but basically it was for the copper gaskets that they put in race car engines, like solid copper gaskets. I don't know if you ever heard of those.
Yeah, makes sense.
I mean, well, the thing with copper versus like
steel or aluminum.
Steel, aluminum, or the other kinds, copper dissipates heat rapidly.
Yeah.
And when you have it sandwiched in between 2 engine plane surfaces, it doesn't warp. But it's horribly expensive. Like you wouldn't used to do that for your, Escort or whatever. And those guys would come in and they had the cool jackets because they were using our machines to design them and make they had to make dyes for them and stuff. And it's like, oh man, I always wanted one of those Cosworth jackets. They're all British guys too. And they'd be in there because you talk to them in the break room and like, what are you doing? And we're working on the engine for, so and so. It's like, oh, that's cool. It's like, where can I get one of those jackets? Like, that's hard. It's difficult. So I always wanted to collect things like that. It's like, yeah, that's cool. But to have an actual, not one you can buy on the internet or something, but like one that actually was given to the employees of said company for a reason, like those are the cool ones to have. But yeah, I didn't have any luck getting ones. But yeah, I remember it was cool. The Cosworth guys would come in every so often and use our machines to just proof out a few things to put on the race cars.
Yeah, we got the race next Sunday.
Yep.
And qualify on Saturday. Nathan, are you going to pay attention to qualifying this year?
I might. I mean, I'm
That
invested in this more and more every year. It's like, yeah, this
yeah,
is what I'm doing on Sunday.
that's the kind of step up I made where it's like I started out just watching, well, listening to a podcast and not even watching highlights. And then I watched highlights on YouTube, and then I started watching the races, the ones I could watch because it's before they had the app, but I could like watch them through ESPN. But like it's all weirdly broadcast on ESPN because it's like because the times are so different. It's like it's gonna be on this race weekend. It's gonna be on ESPN2 at 4 a.m. or be on ESPNU or ESPN News. Or randomly, it's like, oh, we're in the U.S. Let's throw it on ABC. Why not?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, you'd see it on. No, I mean, because we've been doing like an F1 segment for like 2 years now, and I just gradually started watching more and more, and then I went down like the history wormholes of like old F1 from the 70s and 80s, which was like wild and crazy, and the stuff they were doing then. But yeah, I might watch qualifying.
Because qualifying's on Saturdays, and it lasts like half an hour, so it's not that much commitment. No. So. But it can be exciting because you have the whole knockout thing where it's like at the end of every session the back five are knocked out. So it's always weird, like when somebody randomly gets in like the top 10 that shouldn't be there. That's always fun. Or see somebody trying too hard to get on pole and like wreck their car.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, you got a race tomorrow. You just fucked all your mechanics.
Yeah, that's always in racing. That's the thing, especially in qualifying. Because I remember IndyCar qualifying can be exciting that way too. Because now they have it's not next day qualifying. I think there's like a week gap. But yeah, those guys will absolutely try to push. I mean, I went to actual IndyCar like time trials and qualifying when we lived in Indiana. I'd been there like 3 times, and so I didn't see any spectacular wrecks, but you could tell that some of these guys were, I mean, they just swing around the corner. And that's back when you could be on the infield, and you're just like smelling oil and burning tires. And it's like, oh yeah, they're absolutely pushing it. And that car is so loud it damages your hearing when it goes by, 14,000 RPMs. That's back when IndyCar was like IndyCar. We're talking late 80s. It's like that was the world. That was like the big horse race of racing. Like nothing was better than IndyCar. It's since then it's all kind of moved around, but that's because the people that owned it. How greedy can we be? Like greedy enough that we drive all this to Europe. That's how greedy it is.
I saw because Jolyon Palmer, he usually does his analysis, but like in the meantime they have him doing analysis on like old races, so that's been kind of fun. And there's like crazy stuff in like the late 80s and I'm not sure, it might have been the whole time, but like they stopped doing it after a while. But there would be a reserve car, so if you like wrecked your car during a race, you could get into another car and keep racing.
Huh, okay, I didn't know about that. That's interesting. That when the cheat codes really start coming into effect. Here's our extra car.
Yeah, because there's like this one time, like the guy won the race, and it's like in the clip, it's like, well, he just wrecked out of the race in the first lap. Like, how's he win the race? It's like he got in the reserve car. They started up the race again. It's like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I forget what
it could be wide open for trouble, but yeah.
Oh, there was like fun stories where like there was a guy who just had a lot of money and he built a car and it wasn't reliable, but he just had a lot of money.
Yeah.
And there's like something like back when like qualifying actually meant you have to qualify to enter the race. That doesn't really mean that anymore.
No.
And you had to be, and this like you had a lot more entries in F1, but like you had to be at least an 80% of the person who put it on pole. So if you're out of that time zone, you didn't qualify for the race. So this guy didn't qualify for the race, but he decided like, I'm ready to go. And when the race started, he just got out on track, started racing.
I'm here. What are you going to do? Arrest me? I'm driving 70 miles an hour in a circle. Get me.
Yeah, that stuff's weird and interesting.
Oh yeah, the eccentric Europeans with a lot of money will do crazy shit like that. I mean, eccentric Americans will too, but yeah,
And I even saw like a whole documentary about like pit stops. That's really interesting because there used to not really be there wasn't pit stops in F1 until like the 70s.
yeah,
But people found out it's like if you I mean there was like a pit stop section, and like if something was broken you'd come in and see if a mechanic could fix it, but that was about it. But you didn't come in and change your tires.
yeah.
And then it was like at some point somebody like just put the math together. It's like, okay, our car isn't as good, but like what if we started on lower fuel, got out front, like how fast can we put more fuel in the car and put new tires on? Like how can we do that? And that's when like lesser teams figured out like, oh, we can be out front if we do this.
Yeah, we're like 80 pounds lighter with the fuel tank quarter full. Yeah, the F1 refueling debacles back when they used to refuel with that fuel. I mean, it could be bad in any race car.
Yeah.
It was bad in NASCAR. It was bad. But those F1s, because of where they had to refuel them and where the driver was, that looked like hell. Like very rarely did people die as a result of it, but they were literally running around on fire. Like if that went wrong, because you're just pouring extremely flammable fuel right down onto red hot engine manifolds. If you don't get that right, it's
I forget. I've been in a NASCAR race I saw recently, but I thought it was weird. There was a part where a guy like missed his pit and he just flew it in reverse and started reversing down the pit lane. Which, because I know more about F1 now. Like I was like, oh no, don't do that. Because in F1, like that's an absolute. Like that is extreme danger. Like, you cannot reverse in the pit lane.
Yeah, you'll just get disqualified.
yeah. So like no. So there's even stuff where like somebody will they'll lose a tire and they're like no, don't put it in reverse. Don't put it in reverse. Just put it in neutral. We'll push it back because it's okay for people to run out and physically push it in reverse, but you cannot put it in reverse and reverse it in the pit lane. That's because probably somebody died, so that's a rule. So like when I'm
actually surprised they still have reverse gears in those cars.
Yeah, I think they didn't for a while, but I think for safety reasons they do have them.
Yeah, there's probably some reason.
Yeah,
because to me it just sounds like extra work, extra weight, extra complication. But
because in testing this week that Lando Norris had to stop his car at the end of the pit lane. But he can't reverse it, so so he put it in neutral and started pushing the car back by himself.
Yeah,
we're looking at those cars because how huge they are. It's like that's got to be hard, but you're not realizing how light they build those things. It probably wouldn't be that hard.
Yeah,
But they do have huge tires. That might be weird and awkward. So.
Yeah, it's a lot of rolling resistance with tires that wide.
Well, I've been like kind of to like, so we can get to our freezer in the garage easily. Like when I park the car, I close the garage door, I throw it in neutral, and I walk the car back till it's like barely an inch away from the garage door, so there's more room to walk to the freezer.
Oh, okay. Nope, that does work.
Yeah, I'm forgetting there was just a bunch of F1 stuff, so I'm forgetting a bunch of stuff. But I saw the Batman this week.
Yeah, so my son saw it. He said it was good, but he goes that 3-hour length was a little
it's too
daunting
long,
for him. He was like,
I didn't think I didn't necessarily felt like 3 hours. I didn't feel as long as it was, but still like even though it's like, nah, it's too long. Although like I had to go to the bathroom for like the last hour of it. And it's like, no, not going. I have never left a movie theater to go to the bathroom, so I wasn't going to start there.
Okay. I've rarely done it, but sometimes you got to do it.
It's like I paid to see this fucking movie. They're not going to rewind it for me, so I'll hold it out.
So who was the Joker? Was it Colin Farrell?
No, it's
not Colin Farrell.
Colin Farrell plays the Penguin.
Penguin, that's it.
But he's completely unrecognizable because he has a big like fat suit on and makeup. which is interesting. He's unrecognizable, and like he does like this like 1950s like New York taxi driver kind of voice. So it's weird, but he does bring something to the role. So
Yeah, I was just surprised when I found out it was like, oh, it's Colin Farrell as Penguin.
It's Paul Dano plays the Riddler.
That's right.
That's really the big bad guy in this movie. I don't want to talk too much about it. I just kind of give you the heads up in case you see it, but I don't know. So I know Andrew might want to talk about it, but yeah, it's pretty much just emo Batman, and I'm totally here for emo Batman. I even read some things that talked about like Matt Reeves based this Batman on Kurt Cobain, and that's why they have the song in the trailer and it's in the movie.
Oh, the really slow Something's in the Way. Okay.
Yeah.
I remember when I made parody songs of all the Nirvana songs off the Nevermind album about me being fat. And my friends thought it was hilarious. And because now when I hear that song, it's always my lyrics. It's like, stomachs in the way. Yeah. Ooh. And I had one for every song. I wrote like parody lyrics about me, how fat I was. And it was, that was like it was 25 years ago I was doing that. But yeah, that was, so now whenever I hear Nirvana songs, I always, my goofy parody lyrics come back. I mean, it seemed funny to me at the time because people were laughing and they loved it, but they were also all stoned, and I wasn't into pot, so I was like sober. So I had to like, well, you guys are all high, so I'm just gonna riff and do stupid shit because I'm not really into all this weed shit. But yeah, so yeah, now I've like ruined Nirvana, the Nevermind album for myself because I just took because remember that was when the CDs had all the lyrics printed in them.
Yeah.
I was just writing like a maniac.
I never actually sat down and listened to that whole album. That was one of those like,
great.
Yeah, I think I've probably listened to the live album more than I listened to Nevermind.
Oh, okay.
Because that was just like when Nirvana was so big. It's like, well, you don't need to buy the album. There's all their songs are on the radio.
I remember when that album came out. I was in high school. This is crazy. What does this say about America? It's like they're tired of hair metal. New genre.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
That's what it says.
But this Batman's interesting because it's essentially just completely deprived of any Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
It's pretty much just 100% Batman movie. Like, he does show up, like, he is in public as Bruce Wayne, but, like, in here, he's not like in the other depictions of him, Bruce Wayne's kind of like this, kind of like, aloof philanthropist. Like, everybody kind of feels sorry for him because his parents were killed, but he's like giving back to society. And here he's just like, he's basically just seems like a kid who's angry that his parents were killed and he never leaves his house.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much just 100% a Batman movie, which has like some interesting implications towards the end of the movie. There's a lot of things like there's a lot of like goofy stuff in the movie where it's like that doesn't make sense. But like when I thought about it afterwards, it's like, oh wait, no, that's kind of brilliant. Not the stupid stuff's still stupid, but there's some stuff it's like, oh wait, that was cool. Also, the car was cool as fuck.
Oh yeah, I heard this was like a low tech Batman. Like it's not.
Yeah, it's almost. I don't know. I never read it, but I heard the idea of it. But did you ever read or hear of Batman Year One, where it's like him, like starting out as Batman and stuff, and he's like the trials and tribulations of being Batman.
Oh, I think I have
like,
heard that.
It's almost like that. Although even in this movie, he says he's been doing the Batman stuff for 2 years, and he's like concerned that it's not working because it's like crime's up, drug abuse is up. Like, is this really working? Should I do this anymore? Yeah, it's not as fantastical. Although I think this is better than Batman Begins, but definitely not better than The Dark Knight. But this is more like, if you think of Dark Knight as Christopher Nolan doing Michael Mann's Heat, like this is Matt Reeves doing David Fincher's Seven as a Batman movie.
Oh, okay. The guy playing Batman is he's famous for The Lighthouse, right?
He's probably more famous for the Twilight movie. Okay.
Nobody watched The Lighthouse. But it's
actually, I haven't seen a lot of memes about like Robert Pattinson and his big thing being the Lighthouse.
Well, now I've given it
over
away.
this movie. So
yeah, I've given it away. I like the guy who plays the. He's my favorite actor from Westworld.
Yeah, he plays
Gordon.
Gordon. Yeah.
What's his name? It's got a cool sounding name. Let me go to cast. Jeffrey Wright.
Yeah.
He was also in Hold Back the Dark or whatever, which was a really weird movie where he was like, oh, he's the only sane person in the movie. Like everyone else is a lunatic.
Yeah, in this he's almost like a character like out of place in the like in the Gotham that's presented, but it's kind of funny because there's also this point where they go in this place together. It's him and Batman, and then like. And he pulls out his gun, and Batman's like, "No guns." And he's like, "Yo, man, that's your thing."
Yeah. Yeah. Good luck with that. I'm done.
But yeah, there's a thing in the because like the car in this isn't like super special. It's just like a souped up muscle car that has like a jet engine in the back of it. And like at moment, and there's like part like he's chasing the penguin. The penguin's in like a BMW or something, but like not necessarily like a super powerful BMW, just kind of like a road car. But you know, they still put big engines in those. But it's like, why is he not like immediately catching up with the BMW? And then I was like, oh wait, this car is armored like a fucking tank. That giant engine is
10,000 pounds.
Yeah, that giant engine is just to make it drive like a normal car. It's not meant to make it go faster than anything else. It's just moving a lot of weight.
Well, did you see when Jay Leno and those guys had the Batman, the Tumbler from the Christopher Nolan?
Yeah.
That's a real vehicle.
Yeah, yeah.
Like you can drive that. Like it doesn't like hook around corners and have night vision and shit. But and they were driving it, and it just had a big, powerful V8 engine in it, but it weighed a lot.
Yeah.
And it had a weird drive line too, because it had huge tires in the back, little tires in the front, that kind of shit. And Jay Leno was talking to the engineers because they were driving it around, and it actually got around pretty good. But they were like, "How do you get this thing to move like this quick?" He's like, "Oh, it's got like 4:9 gear ratio." It's like when that thing's going 45 miles an hour, that engine is at red line. That's just how it's geared, is how we make it move in the film. Like you could never practically drive this for any length of time. You just blow the engine apart. But yeah, that makes sense. Like, you know, just big up armored vehicles. They weigh a ton.
Yeah, because a moment there I was like, this is stupid. Why can't he catch him? And then I had that realization, like, oh wait, this thing's a fucking tank.
Well, it's just like one of the. Go ahead.
Well, there's a point where, like, you know, those like, are they like, it's like giant concrete, like, cylinders. I think they use it for, like, plumbing or something.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? And they put them on, like, on the back of trucks.
Yeah.
And you can see it in the trailer, like, one of those, like, falls off the truck, and he just drives straight through it. Like, it's not even there.
Yeah. It's a concrete, like, caisson for sewage or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's just flying through it because the vehicle so much, it just pushes way through it.
No dent whatsoever.
Well, it's like one of the best car chase scenes I've ever seen was because it explains like, oh, this is perfectly the difference between modern cars and old cars, was the Tom Cruise Jack Reacher, because he has that old hot rod Nova and he's going after those European or Russian guys in the Audi. Yeah. And you think he's just going to bash that Audi off the road. It's like, no, they weigh the same. It's just that Audi's a lot more structurally built for collision and stuff. That old hot rod just has a lot of hollow voids in it. It just looks big.
Yeah.
It's just like a guy that takes steroids and works out, but he's not really like superhuman strong.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that's exactly what that is. Those cars have relatively the same weight and power. It's just the big V8 hot rod sounds cool and looks cool because it looks bigger, but it's like when you start bashing them together, it's like, no, they're fairly equally matched. And like a lot of people didn't like that chase scene for that reason. It's like, oh, he would have crashed right through those guys. Like, no, he wouldn't. That car's like 40 years old and it's not designed like new cars are more like spaceships, the way they have everything's all packed into them and they're designed to survive crashes. Old cars weren't. They were just designed to look cool.
Yeah.
That's why new cars don't look as cool as old cars, because they just have a bunch of lawsuit considerations in them. It's like, well, if these guys do this, then, you know, we're going to get sued for that. So we got to make it look like an egg. Because you can put 80 pounds of weight on an egg and it won't crack. Ever seen that video? They
Probably,
take
yeah.
a regular chicken egg and they start stacking weights on it from like weight plates.
Yeah.
I think you can put like 80 pounds on it and then it'll just fail catastrophically when it's you put 80 pounds plus 1 ounce. But yeah, it's like the egg's shape is very structurally sound. That's why they build cars the way they do now.
Yeah, I thought that movie was decent. Like the only reason I went to it is because it wasn't on HBO Max.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for it to come out on something.
But yeah, I enjoyed it. But yeah, it's too long. But all movies seem to be too long at the moment. So, and it looked really cool. So
Yeah,
it was always because they're kind of going for like the gothic Art Deco kind of thing, and then somebody pulls out a cell phone and it just seems weird.
yeah, it's like there should be steam and gears on that phone. What is this?
But on HBO Max, which I actually saw this on TNT after like AEW Dynamite ended, but it's on HBO Max. It's called Class Action Park. Have you heard about this? It's a documentary. No. So I guess there was a park in the 80s in like New Jersey called Action Park, and it was just like, man, they just built like these giant contraptions and just like threw kids down them.
Is this like the jungle gyms that look like, is this designed for kids to play on or die on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like they had like a slide that was like just went down a giant hill and did a loop, and like you'd go in the loop and like
yeah, what could go wrong?
And like there was just they'd like literally find like teeth imprinted in like the top of the loop, or like you would just hit it face first and stuff like that. And like and this
skull in metal.
Yeah, and there's like and they just talk about how like there's basically like there's basically there was rules, but like nobody followed them. So like this like kids really liked this place because it was basically freedom, but then like people started dying.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like constant death, but like it was actually constant breaking of bones and stuff. Yeah. But like I think only like 3 people ever died on it, but it's like there should be 0, but and the most people that died was drowning because they had like this big pool area that like created these waves. And like someone get knocked over and trampled, and they get stuck in the bottom of the wave machine and die. It happened twice. And there was a weird one where they had like these like little power boats, and it was like a rapid like race where you could just race these tiny power boats. And then like somebody got like something wrong, and like a kid was electrocuted or something.
Oh God!
Because they had like lights in the water to like point out and stuff like that. Whatever. Or no, I think it was like a fan that was like circulating something, and like some power got mixed up and then like just started electrocuting people.
Yeah, it never works.
And of course the guy is like, he's like one of Trump's friends or whatever. And this guy like, no insurance company would like be down for this. So he just made a false like Cayman Island insurance company. That
Oh boy.
And then he would just never settle any suit. He took it all the way to the wall and just
bankrupt those plaintiffs.
Yep, that's what he did. Yeah. Which there's like stuff that like keeps people from doing that. I can't. Is that what? No, what are anti-slap laws? Is that about you can't sue people for saying stuff, or is that also you just can't sue people into oblivion? I can't remember. I
thought slap laws were about stealing people's intellectual property. I don't know. Let me look.
Okay.
Why not? Anti-slap is to prevent people from using court and potential threats of a lawsuit to intimidate people who are exercising their First Amendment rights. So, okay, it's basically you can't sue people for libel.
Okay.
Continuously. Now, I forget. Well, yeah. What are you talking about? Like it's like litigation, like economic something or another.
Yeah, but say basically like if you sue somebody, they just like keep it in court forever until you're bankrupt.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. That can still happen, but like there's there's now stuff out there that can keep that from.
Yeah, it's called class action lawsuits.
yeah, that's true.
That's what does that. You know, a lot of class action lawsuits that they use venture capital funding. Know that?
That makes sense. There's a lot of money in those things.
Yeah, they do the same VC funding.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
does.
that's the stuff. Like, why are lawyers so loaded with money? It's like, oh, and they did this court case for free. It's like, no, they got 10% of the settlement.
Yeah,
and they settled for $40 billion.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd take 10% of $40 billion any day of the week and pay taxes on it and still have a yacht that a helicopter could land on. That's what humanity needs.
But yeah, it's just, I'm not sure if it's a full 2 hour. It might be like an hour and a half.
I'm going to check that out.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's not really like they just have people who are like celebrities you kind of know, and they just talk about their experience at the park, and then they just kind of get into these news stories. So it's not like that in depth, but yeah, it's just crazy. Like what was allowed in the 80s and 90s. It's like, oh yeah, nobody was watching.
Oh, I remember those skate parks they built in Fort Wayne in the 90s. I mean, they still have skate parks, but now there's like waivers of liability you got to sign because the cities will build them, but you got to sign liability. But the shit they were building in Fort Wayne, because it was one of the first cities in America where the city was like, yeah, okay, we'll build a skate park. We're tired of having the police chase the kids around, you know, for grinding their trucks on the curb and screwing up. Like, we'll build a place that they can, but we're going to build a place they can't destroy. They're putting like full half pipes in, big cement caissons that you could ride over. People were just breaking their arms and legs left and right. And, but nobody sued the city because like the people of Fort Wayne really, they were like, we're happy to have this. We're glad these people have a place to go. You're always going to break your arm or leg on a skateboard anyway. Yeah. It's like, might as well do it where you're not going to get run over by a car afterwards. But yeah, they had like full bowls, like 360-degree bowl, like stuff you don't do anymore because it's just your neck breaking in 3 places. Even getting in one of those if you don't know what you're doing. Because the problem with skate parks are not the people that know what they're doing. It's the people that are trying to learn or don't. It's like, here we go. And it's like, But yeah, I remember like, Fort Wayne had a crazy skate park. And it was one of the first in the country. They just built it around that. And they also reinforced the concrete with steel underneath so they could just re-pour it when it would get ground down. That caused a lot of issues. Because, sometimes they didn't keep up on the maintenance. And but yeah, that's I got to check that out.
Yeah, it's on HBO Max. Class Action Park.
Class Action Park. I've been keeping up with. Speaking of HBO Max, I've been inundated with Raised by Wolves.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I love the delicious goofiness of that show.
I haven't started it yet.
Oh, it's worth it. It's worth every penny. You think last year was weird? Holy shit. This isn't quite as like over the top. It's more subtly weird, but it's a strange show. Yeah. And it was strange from the beginning, and it never pretended to be anything else. And that's what I like about it. But I mean, it is weird. I'm just watching this like, what are they doing? It's this is so weird. But I keep watching it every week. So check that one out. I'm not going to say a lot if you haven't seen it yet, but.
Yeah, I did watch all of the season 4 of Drive to Survive. So
okay,
which I don't know because I've been inundated myself with too much F1 stuff. Now when I'm watching the show, it's not as effective because either they're kind of like editing stuff together that would never like actually happen the way it does, or they're just like gaps and stuff. It's like, oh, you forgot this bit.
Yeah, so now you have enough information where it's like, oh, this is not a complete picture.
Yeah, but it's also probably not really meant for me. It's meant for casual viewers to kind of get into. So there is stuff where there's because like the first season it was just like completely chronological. This season it was like almost chronological, and they found ways to like find stories in between. And so whereas like second season it was like all over the place, but they just found more consistent stories in each episode. So this is kind of like a merging of that, where it's like it's chronological but it kind of jumps back in time, but each episode tells its own story. So most of there's like multiple stories with McLaren, and it's like it's with like Daniel Ricciardo having trouble kind of keeping up with Lando Norris, and then like a later episode, that's when they had they win at Monza and have the 1-2, and so that's like a good payoff. It's like, oh, it all worked out. Although you kind of forget the whole part where like after that race they kind of fell off the fucking map and disappeared from the championship.
It's just the drama of that moment on TV.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
And then like Max is like, he refuses to participate in Drive to Survive, but they pretty easily find ways, because they can just use all the media that was collected anyways, and so they just put that in there.
Oh, okay. Why doesn't he participate? Does he have a reason?
Oh, because just the way they edit it.
Okay.
So he says like, you make me say things I didn't say, and he says he doesn't like that, which I totally agree. It's like, yeah, but he's also like, he's an asshole. So
yeah. Yeah, I have a real abrasive personality, and I kind of just shoot off my mouth all the time, and you make me look like a guy who does that. I'm not happy with that.
Yeah, like, I don't know, like that's Max Verstappen. I don't expect him to be like necessarily socially conscious or be media trained. He's just a good driver, and I'll just let him do
He's
that.
someone who drives a car really fast. Like, at risk of his life. Like, his job involves him putting his life at great risk every time he does it. And if he doesn't come in first, everyone's like, you suck. It's like, wait a minute, I drove a car around a track at 180 miles an hour at some time with other people right next to me. Nope, still suck. So, yeah, it's nothing fair. Sports people in any kind of sports, everyone's just terrible to them.
Yeah. You get a bit of interesting, like, you get more Susie Wolf, who was like never in any of the other seasons, but now they kind of follow Total Wolf around a bit more, and Susie Wolf's there. And I didn't know she was British. I know her, like, she's Total Wolf's wife, but like I also know her, she was a reserve driver for Williams, like in the 2010s or whatever.
Oh, okay.
But she never got to actually race an F1 car, but she was like the only female reserve driver for like a decade or so.
Huh.
She actually raced against Christian Horner when Christian Horner was racing. Except she was way better than him.
Oops.
That's all right, yeah. I mean, like, also Total Wolf was also a racer, but he was he's a fucking giant Austrian. You can't put guys like that in cars, so
yeah.
Can't fit him in.
You can't put like Conan the Barbarian fucking race car. Arms sticking out the sides,
That's the thing I heard about, like a sad thing about Nico Hulkenberg, because people are saying like he could have been up for that Haas seat, but like when I was watching the old F1 stuff there, because he was like bouncing around from team to team, he's like, he's a good driver, why isn't anybody keeping him? He's like, well, he doesn't bring enough money, but also like they were just like they didn't want him in a car, because like he was up for like the Ferrari drive, but then like they didn't want him because they said he was too big. Because like all F1 drivers are super small and very skinny, and he's built like a rugby player.
Yeah. Yeah, you're actually going to like hurt the car. Like, yeah, it's not going to perform as well because.
Well, also back then they didn't have minimum weight requirements for the drivers. The drivers would just like literally starve themselves for.
Oh, they're like jockeys, huh? They just just manorexics.
But now there is a minimum weight requirement, so it doesn't necessarily matter how much you weigh, but
unless you're over 5'8", and a normal human being, then you're like.
But but you can't just be a typical American hop in the car. You still got to be in shape.
Yeah, you're not shoving me in an F1 car. It's like no one can drive his car like Nathan, but it's like, wow. It was like putting a guy in an astronaut suit in one of those little race cars that, those little buggies you drive around the tracks that you're in, It's like, this isn't going to work.
Well, I saw they had the Zach Brown, he was showing off his race car collection, and like, he's like, yeah, this is the car I won this like Detroit race with. It's like, oh, you're a race car driver? It's like, yeah, and then I became a money guy.
Yeah.
And then
a lot easier ways to get paid.
And then he has like some of the cars. And he was like, "Oh man, I used to be able to fit in that one, but I can't anymore."
I was surprised how small aircraft cockpits were.
Yeah, I imagine.
Even the World War II stuff, like when I went to Yankee Air Museum, like they had a Mitchell there, like Grandpa used to fly in Indochina, and I was like, how did he fit in this thing? Because he was tall. He was taller than me.
Yeah.
And I mean, he probably wasn't as wide as me, but he was definitely as tall as me back then, like in World War II. And it's like, oh, how did? And then the guy giving the tour was like, yeah, you had to climb out of the cockpit to jump out of it if it was going down. It's like, oh, really good pilot because it's like, there's no way he's getting out of there quick with a chute on his back.
Yeah.
Or sitting on it.
Yeah, I saw a picture where they were showing like how cramped the ball gunners were.
Oh yeah, that was insane. I think you had to be under like 5'3" or something. Like it was, you couldn't even consider it if you were.
And like and it's weird because it's like they're going in there with like they would just like take their clothes off to go in there because it's so hot in there.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Even though they're at like like 20,000 feet where it's freezing cold, but like because it was like, however the mechanics of it worked, it just your body heat, close cramped corners, and it was like operated by battery. It was just super hot.
Very ball gun was electrically operated by DC direct drive motors because those were the strongest. They were the most powerful. They're also the hottest, and the kind of current they were feeding into them because it had to move fast. Like they had that thing just jacked because the ball gun really threw especially German attackers off. Because that could attack you at angles that you would never. You could always have guns out the side, guns out the back, guns out the front, and a guy on top. But you never had a guy. You could always come up below the plane, especially a bomber in World War II. They were just big, unwieldy, hulky things. They still are now, but now you got missiles. So, but yeah, you could come up behind them and just rake the plane with your
machine guns.
450 caliber machine guns or whatever insane. But yeah, the ball turret really threw that off because now there's a guy on the bottom, just some angry little monkey throwing, lead at you. Like
250 cals back at you.
Yeah, from angles you can't like negotiate. And because the Germans made a study of especially the American ball turrets and the B-52 or no, it was the Super Fortress B-25. And it's like, yeah, there's angles you can attack them from where that won't get you, but they're not angles that are good for like, machine gun fire. And but those things are terrible. Like they have one out at the Air Museum, like just out on its own.
Yeah.
And there's no way a person's going to fit in that. Like it's just too small. But yeah, all that World War II stuff was just like tiny. It was just designed for, you could tell these people came out of a time, the Depression, where there was a lot of food insecurity, not a lot of veg, not a lot of sugar in the food. And it's like, yeah, just put these tiny little men in these. Even tanks were small, especially like the Russian stuff. Like it's like, yeah, get in there, driver, and it looks like something as big as a gallon of milk. Like I'm supposed to fit through that. It's like, yeah, and it's hard to get in, and if the tank gets hit, you better hope you get out because it's on fire. But yeah, all that old World War II aircraft, especially, you see that, and it's like, God, this was tiny spaces for guys. And then they're firing guns, huge guns, loud, ferociously loud guns in this narrow. Even the guys the door gunners on the planes, those are just big 50 caliber guns, and they're right next to each other. One guy's shooting this way, one guy's shooting this way, back to back. Can you imagine how loud that just firing that 50 caliber gun off? Don't see that anymore. I think the last plane that fired guns that was a bomber was the B-52, and they don't even do that anymore. They had like 450 calibers coming out of the back, and it was like radar guided. Like you could shoot planes that were chasing you with them, but they were like more modern. They had a much higher rate of fire.
So I was like, well, about the C-130 Spectre, but that's not meant to fire at airplanes.
No, I mean it could, but it would have to catch them. It's just like, only attack him at 45 degrees. And they don't make stuff like that anymore. But they don't need. That's what missiles ruined all that. And they still fire guns off of planes.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's like that's why like in that Pentagon Wars book, it talks about how like that's what they really fucked up with the Phantom, is they made it all missiles, and then they couldn't turn enough to actually fire the missiles, and so like, no, we need a gun on this plane. They had to make like weird gun pods to put on the side of the on the hard points of the plane.
We did that, and there's a thing on YouTube. I forget which Russian MiG it was, but they had this horribly, I mean, tremendously powerful gun that they used for like Navy ships. And I forget what size shells. The shells itself were not, they were like 35, 40 caliber. They were big, but they made this gun that could fire them like at speed. Like the way it was designed, it just like, rock, you know, it just fire a bunch of them. It was like insane. Like, remember the port gun on Forgotten Weapons?
Yeah.
The M16 that just like emptied its magazine in a second. Okay,
Yeah.
basically made a naval gun that would do that, and they're like, we need to put this in a MiG for ground. You know, it's like we could just, this thing could destroy anything on the ground, like tanks, whatever. And the way this plane flew, it had good characteristics for this. I forget which MiG it was, but it worked. But the problem is it was so powerful, and they had to kind of redesign the front of the plane around it. It would rip itself out of its like supports, and it was going through ammo so quickly it would change the flight dynamics of the plane because it was just dumping weight. That because it was, you know, these big Oerlikon style shells, and it wasn't designed for anti-armor, but they just, you know, they just made them out of depleted uranium or something. It's like, then it's anti-armor because nothing's stopping that bullet at that speed. But it was single barrel. It wasn't like the A-10 has the multi-barrel, and the plane was built around it. Well, this was like a Russian solution. It's like, well, we have this naval gun and we have this plane, and you know the engines on this plane are so powerful and its flight characteristics are so good that like this could destroy things on the ground. Like, we don't need to design an A-10. We'll just put this on the MiG, but it never worked because it was, the gun was so powerful and fast that like it couldn't, it would just rip itself out of the supports. And then the pilots would be trying to, because the nose would crumple, and the pilots would be trying to land this plane because all of a sudden their cockpit's down a few degrees. Like, oh no. But yeah, they showed this gun in test firings with the plane stationary. They were just doing fire. And it's like, oh, what kind of gun is that? Like, where did they make a single-barreled gun that fired that fast? But I guess it was also like smooth bored, so it just gave like directional guidance to the because it was to attack stuff on the ground.
Yeah,
they just had to line up a sight and just dump ammo. But it was insanely fast. It was like, I can't believe how fast that is. It was like comparable to a multi-barreled gun, but it was a single-barreled weapon.
I have the A-10 Warthog flight simulator game, and you have to compensate when you fire it because it'll tilt the plane down.
It'll shut the engines down. It'll stall. That thing's tremendously evil. It's like the most destructive aircraft, well, ground attack aircraft ever made. That and the KC-130. Like, that's just pouring so much firepower out of that thing. It's like, oh, that's nuts.
But yeah, that was the thing in the Pentagon Wars book. They talk about how they actually end up putting like guns back on airplanes because missiles didn't make them obsolete because of how the characteristics of like war is supposed to engage. So it's like you can't just like, because they always talk about like, the F-14 Tomcat, it can engage up to like 15 targets up to like 10 miles away. And it's like, okay, yeah, you can't just see something on your radar and hit the button to fire at it. You have to actually confirm that there's a plane out there that's the enemy, and then you can kill it. So it's like to actually get into sight range of the enemy to see who they are and confirm like, okay, this is an enemy, let's kill it. You're already in, you're kind of out of the missile range and you're already in gun range. So that's why they made the F-16. It's as a dogfighting airplane, because it's like, it's the practicality of how war is supposed to be carried out. So,
well, I know with like the F-22 and the F-35, a lot of, because there's like weird planning around that, but that thing basically like opens up bays and missiles just fall out and ignite can go. But those are also satellite or AWACS guided. So they literally can, like, oh, I see something on the distance. I have a lock. I press the button. The missile just falls out and takes off on its own. But it's not totally your radar that's giving it information, or its seeker head on board, which can be fooled. It's like, oh, it's coordinated with like a satellite and AWACS. But then some of the things that killed those planes, or at least has made them seem like less like the ultimate 6th generation Warcraft, is like, what if we don't have that AWACS or that satellite? What if that's jammed? Then what do these planes do? It's like, well, they're really sophisticated, high-tech things, and they're very expensive, but how do they do in dogfighting? It's, we don't know. So then they start putting F-35, because its gun is like behind, comes from over the top.
Yeah.
It's like a weird one. And, but that's, so they like they have huge missile capacity, and I thought it was interesting. Like they started putting them inside. It's like, why is that? It's like, oh, because the missiles on the wings like triple your radar signature.
Yeah.
So they just quit. It was like, yeah, we'll just make bays inside that rotate around and drop these missiles out. It's like, yeah, that's gonna work all the time. It's this complicated load system. I don't know. They've had those for a long time though.
Yeah.
I mean, the B-52s that the Doom missions to Russia. Like those just had like rotary launchers in them that just dropped Tomahawk missiles with nuclear warheads, and they could put like 20 in there. Because what happens is they just rotate around and the missile drops out, and then they drop out the next one, they drop out the next one, and then they, go to their targets. It's like, yeah, that's like 20 nuclear missiles in one plane. I never used them though, thank God, but they had them.
Yeah. But also that book's like 30 years old. So
yeah. I mean, it's still applicable to today, because you read about this stuff and then you're like, yeah, they're running into the same problems, just newer technology. And it's like, oh yeah, we've built it to do this, 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 and that. And it's like, well, what if this doesn't work? It's like, oh, well, yeah.
Well, yeah, that was a weird,
really expensive paperweight.
Yeah, that was a weird, that was like kind of a weird chapter in there, because it's like, and also like when we read that a Matterhorn book where it's like, it was foggy out, so the choppers couldn't run. It's because it's like it's a good way to kill yourself because you can't see where you're going.
Fly into a fucking mountain.
and you talk about like how the Warthog, like it wasn't designed to like run in inclement weather and stuff like that. So if it's like raining out or clouds out or whatever, it's like you can't necessarily run it. But they were talking about the F-117D bomber, and it was like supposed to be this catch-all. It's like all weather running, all this stuff will work in all conditions, and they try to cram everything in there, and the thing never worked.
No,
just a giant $1 million failure, $1 billion failure.
Yep. Yeah, when they try to do those everything aircraft, it never works because they're not everything. It's like the A-10's the best like ground assault plane in the world. It's not. Now imagine if you gave it that mandate and it's like, oh, and you have to be an air superiority fighter. It's like, well, it's not possible now. It's now we're stupid. You're better off just launching 1 million drones, which is kind of what it's going to become eventually, because it's like, yeah, that's or then you have like super carriers are obsolete. It's like, not if we put missile tubes in them. They're not, there's all kinds of weird thinking around. I showed you that. Did you ever see that picture of the Enterprise, the new Enterprise?
I think so. I can't remember.
I think I was telling you about it because the front of it opens like the front of the ship.
Yeah.
So they can launch missiles and shit out of it, because it looked like the Vengeance from the Star Trek show. Because it was all red and lights inside going. It's like, yeah, what's this thing from hell? It's like, oh, that's the new missile capacity of the aircraft carrier. It's like, aircraft carrier missiles, I wonder what kind of missiles they're going to shoot out of that. Not 100-pound conventional explosives entirely, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think things are weird now because it seems like we've outspent everybody, so nobody can like make submarines or carriers or really expensive airplanes, but it's like a lot of people can make a lot of drones that do really simple things.
Yeah.
It seems like tanks are almost being obsolete because a dude with a tube can take it out.
Yep. When a $50,000 shoulder-fired rocket can destroy a tank that cost $8 million, Like if you add that up over thousands of combat hours, oh, you're making money off every one of those shoulder fire missiles.
And how quick it is to train a guy to shoot that missile versus to train that guy to run that tank.
Yeah, what is the guy? Yeah, the tank needs like not only guys to operate it, but guys to fix it. Like, because it breaks constantly because it's just some weird complex machine that's like, we don't run tanks like we run tractors where we have a million hours of like data on what works and what doesn't. No, they bring these things out every so often. And yeah, but the guy firing I mean, how long could it take you to learn to use a javelin? Like seriously, like you could learn in like 10 hours.
YouTube video.
Like you point your weird styrofoam thing at the beep. Oh, okay. Oh, well, I'm done. You know, now it's time for it to do its work. Go do the devil's business. Good way to kill 6 guys. Oh, yeah. It's like I couldn't. I don't know how a tank works. I couldn't fit in one even if I did. You're never too fat for a javelin. One size fits all. Yeah, matter of fact, you can kind of brace yourself, you know, use your weight as a counterbalance to the But yeah, that's well, it's like, you know, we have electromagnetic rail guns now. I mean, they're not like front line. It's like $10,000 a shot, but it's like, yeah, nuclear bombs were really expensive when we first made them too, and all that shit was really, now it's cheap. I mean, remember like I said, we were talking about Miami Vice earlier, and the guy had a laser sight on his gun from the 80s that looked like the actual weapon that was, it was so huge, and now it's like, yeah, that's tiny.
Have you seen the latest season of The Expanse?
Yeah.
Remember that scene where like they're flipping around and firing the railgun?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That was a cool scene.
Oh yeah. They have fun with that. Well, I like how like it's like that's one thing I will talk about the book a little more next week. But one thing I liked about The Expanse is like, oh, that's just kind of the shit we do now, but it's in space. Like they're in 3 dimensions. Because if you attack an aircraft carrier, you know, when they're firing off all the anti-missile guns, what are they called, PDCs or whatever?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's what that really looks like. It's just like you fire a missile at an aircraft carrier, and you're going to see like all these things like, you know, they're just going to be firing thousands and thousands of rounds downrange.
But in The Expanse, they're like twisting around, so it looks like a spirograph of weapons being fired.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I will mention one thing about the last book of The Expanse. I like it. They actually talked about something I was wondering about. Because remember when the Laconian Marines were attacking them at that school where they were trying to rescue Duarte's daughter?
Yeah.
And they just fired the PDC off in an atmosphere, and it like fucking vaporized. Like the crazy lady couldn't, but the crazy Laconian Marine lady was like, I can't believe they did that. Like, because it's just an electromagnetic shell going at like Mach 50, and they just fired it in an atmosphere, and it did terrible damage. And she's like, that's insane, that's dangerous, you'd never do that, but they did it. It's like, yeah, that's how those things would work. Yeah, that's the one thing I liked about The Expanse. Like, it's still it's not like Star Trek when they talk about like the dilithium coils and the field matrix and all that. It's like, yeah, I guess that works. The Expanse is like, oh, we're just like one weird virtually unlimited fuel drive system away from being able to do this. Like, this is like, their technology is more advanced than ours, but it's like, oh, it's a close cousin to everything we have here.
Yeah, there's just one breakthrough that they have that we can't.
Yeah, they have the Epstein drive, which interestingly they don't call it that anymore. I wonder why. But yeah, they have the Epstein drive, and it's like, yeah, that's the only thing that makes that universe feasible and economically viable is you put like a pellet in it once a month, and you can go 1 billion miles. You know, it's like.
And then the alien shit's alien shit. So like, yeah, it's like, okay, we didn't build that.
Yeah. Well, it's like Miller says in the books, you know, it's like, well, it's like, why can't we do this? How does this work? It's like, oh, that's the other level of physics you guys don't understand yet. It's like, these are parallel, these are, or what is it? Interdimensional physics. It's like, yeah, this shit works between 2 dimensions, but you don't understand that yet. Miller does, because he's like some construct of the protomolecule, but Like, yeah, that's how that works, but you're not there yet. So, because this shit's only been around like 1 billion years. So, but yeah, that's one thing I always liked about The Expanse, where I think, I mean, visually on the TV show, they got it right. The books were always kind of the books, but it was like, oh yeah, nothing they're doing is unrecognizable. It's like, oh yeah, okay. Unless you get into the alien shit, which of course we don't. Supposedly they're here, but we don't know because they're fucking with our F-18s all the time. Or, yeah, what are those? The carrier ones, F-18s? Yeah, the cubes that the
Hornets.
Yeah.
That's the planes or the Hornets.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about the
alien cubes. Okay.
Yeah, that move around like, they just change direction randomly and stuff. And it's like, yeah, it sounds like a light projection to me, but okay. It's like, these things can't move like this. It violates the laws of physics. Like, not if it's just light in a hologram. That doesn't. Because if you take this laser, I can't. Yeah, you take this laser. Like, I'm violating the laws of physics right now. If you take a solid object, it's like it's changing direction rapidly. It's like, I think someone's just spoofing your equipment, but no. Or it's aliens, one of the two.
Yeah, which is more likely?
Yeah, believe me, if somebody has the technology to do that to us and we don't understand it, and it's terrestrially based, it's like, well, we're screwed because they understand things that we don't, apparently.
Yeah, don't worry about it, dude. We're fucked.
Yeah, it's just like the Havana syndrome, where I ever tell you what that one physicist said? It's
what?
like, because they had some extraordinary commission have meetings about this, and it's like, oh yeah, they're directing microwaves like through walls and windows to attack our agents, but the microwaves aren't affecting the walls and windows in any way. They're just, when they hit our agents, they're turning something on that makes it dangerous. And this one physicist said, if there's a country out there that has that technology, we need to surrender to them immediately because they're doing things that like are not possible. And if it is possible, then they understand something about the universe that we fundamentally missed. So surrender now.
Yeah, but for the UFO guys, it's not about like, oh, the government's hiding this alien technology from it because we won't understand it. It's like, no, they're in cahoots with the aliens. Isn't that what they're about? Yeah,
there's always some kind of like fantastic, like, oh, that would be so cool if that was true story going around, but then it never. Like, yeah, we've been waiting for, the Roswell happened in the 40s. Still hasn't borne that fruit yet. I mean, like I said, when we start seeing cars fly around and stuff, it's like, oh, yeah, we're in cahoots with aliens. Like, if we can get like 10,000 pounds in the air just by using like magnets and very little energy, it's like, okay, we didn't invent that. I mean, it's also like we're breaking like all the laws of thermodynamics and physics by having that do that. So, yeah, obviously aliens, but until then, because they all say like computers came from aliens. Like, the reason we have these computers is from aliens. It's like, yeah, because there's no logical progression from vacuum tubes to semiconductors to microprocessors. Like, there's no chain we can follow. It's just we showed up with semiconductors like immediately. It's like, no, it's been a long process, and it hasn't. It's like that stuff's fanciful and fun to listen to, but then because I do enjoy that. I watch UFO shows and ghost shows and shit all the time.
Yeah.
They're not like, oh, now I believe. I'm just like, oh, what are you guys coming up with? What's this now? What do you say? Like the ghost radios. I love those. Where it's like you go into a room and it's like, and you have a frequency hopping radio. It's like, what do you want to say to me or whatever? And then it just randomly spits out garbage because it's just skipping frequencies and picking up one word at a time. And it's like, oh, it's a message. It means something. It's like, no, it doesn't. It's just, it's just like randomness that you're assigning meaning to. It's like the Kennedy assassination. The one guy, he's a famous writer. He said the whole Kennedy assassination is based on people's association of things that have no meaning that suddenly had meaning because Kennedy got assassinated. I forget who said that, but it was like, yeah, he's kind of right. It's sort of true, but it's also, there's some weird stuff there too. But
yeah,
it's like, but when you start drilling down and looking for details that would have had no significance at any time, until you attach it to the Kennedy assassination. Then it becomes like, sinister plot involving a cast of thousands. And no one's talked ever. See, that's where 9/11 falls apart. The 9/11 stuff.
Yeah.
It's like they put thermite in the buildings, and it's like, and the planes were flown in by, they were the people took over the planes and they plugged in a module and they drone flew them in there, and it's like, okay, if you can even prove all that stuff, which you haven't proved any of it, by the way. The ultimate problem is you're talking about a conspiracy that would involve thousands of people that either simultaneously would commit suicide when the event was over, or just never talked. And like, that doesn't happen. There's no amount of money that's going to guarantee silence, because someone's going to get cancer. Someone's going to be afraid that, time to suck up to God. I'm about to die. And they're going to talk. That always happens. I mean, it doesn't happen like a year later, but it will happen eventually. And that's where all the 9/11 stuff gets weird. It's like, yeah, if one or two people could have carried this off within our government to make it look like something else, it's like, I might believe you. I mean, we can't even keep secret shit secret. Half the shit we talk about on this podcast is because somebody talked about something that, I mean, it's always there. So, yeah. Well, anyway, I got to go.
Right.
So that's it for me this week for the American Greed Factory podcast. This is Nathan.
This is Colin. Goodbye, America.